Bloomberg News.
Joining us now by phone from Frankfurt to talk more about the markets, Jim Rogers, chairman of Rogers Holdings. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Carol. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Market's not doing so well. You think September was enough to clean out the financial system?
Well, I don't know. September and October are traditionally the times when it happens. It was a nice move downward, as you know, but I think there should be more to come.
How much more, Jim?
I have no idea. It depends on what those clowns in Washington do, and so far they've been made a fool of themselves.
I know you've been critical of the guys in Washington, but do they really have any choice at this point?
I know, Carol, and you've been supporting them for 15 months. Every time they make a mistake, you think they're doing the right thing, but they're doing the wrong thing. No, they haven't done the right thing. This is terrible for America and for the world. Why should 300 million Americans bail out a few thousand people in the financial community? I just don't understand this. Taxes will go up, interest rates will go up, inflation will go up, the U.S. dollar will go down. Why is this good for the world?
Listen, what would happen, in your view, if we didn't get a bailout plan and we let these firms fail?
Well, we would have a sharp decline in the economy and in the stock market, and we would hit bottom, we would clean out the system, and we would start over. You know, as you may remember, the Russians had the same thing in 1998. They had a very sharp decline, a horrible economy for a year, and they've been the strongest economy, one of the strongest in the economy in the world for the last 7 or 8 years. The South Koreans did the same thing. I mean, and if you look back at the Japanese, who in 1990 said, we're going to do it the other way, we're not going to let people bail out, and we're not going to, we are going to bail people out, we're not going to let people fail. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the expression zombie banks or zombie companies? Mm-hmm. Well, the Japanese still call the 1990s the lost decade. In the 1970s, America did the same thing, and for a whole decade we had horrible inflation, horrible taxes, high interest rates, a terrible economy. America's doing exactly the same thing, which did not work in the 1970s, which did not work in the 1990s. They're not doing what has worked before with Russia, South Korea, many other countries. I mean, these clowns in Washington, Carol, and you too, cannot tell me a single case where bailing people out and propping up companies has led to good things.
Then why,
you can only cite good.
Jim, why aren't we doing this then? Why aren't we letting the companies fail?
Why are we doing it? Because people get on the phone, the heads of people like Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs get on the phone to Paulson. He takes their calls. They say, help us, help us, help us. And Bernanke, who doesn't know anything, takes the calls too. And so all of a sudden, we're all running around with like chickens with our heads cut off and saying, we got to do something, we've got to do something. We don't have to do anything. Why should Congress get involved with this at all?
Jim, you talk about the need to clean out the system, allowing institutions to fail instead of putting the cost of the bailout on 300 million taxpayers. What about the cost of letting these institutions fail? Obviously, banks go down. That costs tens or hundreds of thousands of jobs. Lack of credit is going to cause other companies severe problems, cause contraction in employment there. How exactly is that scenario better than the alternative?
Wait a minute. We have had investment banks have been failing for hundreds of years. You think this is the first time in history that investment banks have gotten into trouble or that banks have gotten into trouble? I said what would happen is we would have a sharp correction in the stock market and in the economy. We would hit bottom, we would clean out the system, and we would start over. Why should all the people out there in America who've been saving their money, paying their mortgage, suddenly have to take on huge debts caused by some people they don't even know, just so some guys on Wall Street can continue to have their Maseratis?
Hey, so Jim, would a better plan be giving a bunch of money to those homeowners who are having trouble making their mortgage payments?
Well, that would certainly be better than what they're doing now. I wouldn't do any of it. As I said, I would do what the Russians did and the South Koreans did and many other countries in history have done. When they get into problems, the people who cause the problem suffer, and then they start over. There's a sharp correction, and they start over. And by the way, Carol, and both of them, why are we taking advice from the people like Bernanke and Paulson who've sworn to us for 2 years there's no problem? Bernanke, under oath, has sworn to us repeatedly there's no problem, everything is fine. Paulson as well. And that guy who's at the New York Fed, he's the real danger. He doesn't know anything. But he thinks he does, and he keeps telling people he does.
Jim,
why are we taking advice from people who've been dead wrong over and over and over again for 2 years? If you came to me, Carol, and said every month for 2 years to do something that was wrong, what, do you think I would listen to you?
No.
Jim, I want you to give our viewers an idea of what a sharp correction is. When you say a sharp correction is necessary, tell me what you think it means in terms of how the stock market would perform, how the economy would perform, how many jobs we would lose, and give them a chance to evaluate that against the scenario being presented to them by lawmakers.
Well, let's first of all, the presentation which Paulson and Bernanke are giving us, we know is probably going to lead to at least a decade of hard times in America. At least it did in the 1970s, and it did in the 1990s in Japan. Remember the lost we had a lost decade too, and the Japanese had a lost decade. So pursuing what they're doing is probably going to take a decade. I have no idea how long this will last. America's in worse shape now than it was in the 1970s. So their scenario is going to last a decade, say. I have no idea how long it will last, but if you look at other countries that have gone through this, it's lasted a year or two, and then they started over.
Hey, Jim, just got about a minute left here. All right, so then what is your advice to investors? I get a ton of emails, bring back Jim Rogers, find out what he's doing. What are you doing at this point?
Well, at this point, I'm mainly sitting and watching. I bought some Swiss francs. I bought some Japanese yen recently. I bought some agricultural commodities recently. I bought some airlines recently. Some of these things are dumped on my head. I bought a few Chinese shares a week or so ago. Mm-hmm. These are things I'm doing, but mainly I'm just sitting and watching. You don't have to do something all the time. It's hard to do something when markets are going down 700 points a day. I mean, maybe if it goes down another sharp correction, maybe that'll hit the bottom. If Congress does nothing, probably the market will collapse a lot, and probably we should all buy.
All right. If Congress does something, which I know you don't agree with, do we get a rally in your view, and should we not read too much into it if we get that rally?
I suspect if Congress does something, we will get a rally. It's a rally which I would plan to sell. Whether I sell it next week or next month or next year, I don't know. But, Carol, if they do something, what are they going to do next year or the year after when they don't have any bullets left? What are we going to do when next year comes and all of a sudden we have problems again and they've shot all their bullets? Then if they do something, then we're going to have a real collapse because the foreign creditors are going to take their money out of the country, the dollar's going to collapse, there's going to be a run on the dollar, and that's going to be the end of the story.
Jim, bottom line, it's better that you think we let these firms fail, Congress do nothing more, the Fed do nothing more, and that we'll get a quicker correction if we let it play out that way?
That's what history's always shown. That's what's happened in every other country that's gone through this, and the ones that have tried to use Band-Aids have suffered for a decade or so.
All right, going to leave it there. Jim, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Jim Rogers, chairman of Rogers Holdings from Frankfurt.
Hear more Bloomberg News reports on the Bloomberg Terminal at AV Go, on Bloomberg Television, and on Bloomberg Radio. Copyright Bloomberg LP 2000.